welcome again to one of our conversations, which we record and like to share with others, whoever may be interested. But honestly, it's you and me sort of unpacking the crazy world of I don't know,
Yeah.
should we call it AI? I feel like that's still one of the biggest problems with this discipline.
No, no, it's final. We are finally kind of opening other pages of AI textbooks, not just connectionist architectures. So I think, yeah, we now kind of more and more legitimately can kind of call this field AI, because up to this point it was mostly connectionist machine learning.
Ah,
But
oh, so
but
okay. I
yeah,
That's
but
a
now,
good
yeah.
point. I like that. Okay. And well, how widespread? I would assume, and I'm just assuming right now that most solutions that people are seeking out are still ML, right? Like people are still predominantly pushing ML solutions. And we spoke last week, and I put out an article yesterday which kind of talked a bit about how it's the noise, the qualitative stuff that
Mm,
people are discarding when they're making decisions, right? If you're just making your decision based on, like today, I just bought and sold some options, right? And I will tell you 1000%, it's random. I have no insight. I have no, all I can do is look for a number to go up or down, and that's how I act or react, right? So if I was a disciplined person, which I'm assuming most aren't, they would have a plan and all that good stuff. And maybe businesses all do, but I bet they actually don't. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what businesses, how well they stick to some rationality. But sorry to unload all that on you, but people are still focusing on ML. Is that still
yeah.
the case? Okay.
Yeah, and maybe to your point, it's kind of always interesting how few publications about investing with AI, and validating, certain option trades or whatever, with machine learning tools, how few publications about that subjects are. But I think, but I think there is a lot of that stuff going on. It's just behind the
Oh,
closed doors.
I'm fascinated with the fact that there's a lot of jobs, especially in banking or investment, which is junior jobs, which tend to be about working extremely hard to build a deck that outlines a company's this, that, and the other, right? It's a
Mm,
ton of work. It's pretty unsatisfying, and that was also a subtopic of my paper, which is what we tried to replace
mm,
at Accenture, which is get rid of people making reports, right? Because they're very time
mm,
consuming. They're
mm,
probably not really used to make any decisions, but they are that, the rigmarole, right, around this.
mm,
Generative AI, which is what we want to talk about, has been shown to be pretty good at building those reports, right? Like it can do these junior reporting jobs about a company. I'm
mm.
assuming. And that leads
Yeah,
me to
yeah.
your big revelation, which is you've been trying to train based on a very focused approach. Let's just say, for example, the company has kept a Confluence
Mm,
server up, wow, or whatever. One of these places to dump stuff, which we both
mm,
work with on a daily basis. Right? Here's a place that we dump all our stuff. I want you to train your model on that dump
mm.
so that somehow we create value. And I want you to unpack this for me from your perspective. Like that's a request, right, that you've been given. Here's
Yeah.
a data set. I want you to train on it, and maybe you can explain whatever rags are and stuff. And it's still a little bit fuzzy on all this stuff, but the idea is that the knowledge is in this little nugget that is ours,
Mm,
that gives some value to us having kept all this crap around for
mm.
all these years. So make it work, and and
Yeah.
and so tell me about that.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say we have a question, well, like user a prompt, like, well, explain to me what department X is actually doing within an organization, right? Like,
Oh,
uh,
ow, good one.
yeah. Like, so there's a certain topic to that question, right? So how this question can be answered, right? Well, this question can be answered maybe to paraphrase a little bit, or kind of like maybe kind of give like some sort of a representation. Well, somebody might have knowledge in their head about what this department is about. So it will provide an answer that is coming from human brain, because I had that
Mhm.
memory and I had an internalized representation of what they are doing. So that's one thing. So that would be kind of an equivalent of having a fine-tuned large language model on the data set that represent the organization, right? So the answer is in the memory of the neural network, kind of similar to kind of the having the answer in the head of an expert that kind of knows about an old timer, right? Within an organization, there is always somebody like that,
Sure.
right? So that's one way to kind of answer that question. But there is another way to answer that question, which is that, hey, again, to a human comparison, well, there is nobody who knows that, so there needs to be a guy who's going to start sifting through the binders or look through some documentation and kind of try to answer that question. So that's where RAG comes into, right? So if I don't have that answer in somebody's head or a neural network, then I have to do a search, and hopefully that search will create a relevant piece of paper, right? Or piece of information
Mhm.
that somebody can read to me or maybe summarize to me, right? And in the RAG system, yeah, that the retrieval is going to be hopefully very good, and in most cases it is, because it's a retrieval using embeddings, so a very kind of tricky thing to represent vectors that kind of describe the information. But I can search those vectors, and I can retrieve the document that this vector is pointing to, and it's
Mhm.
going to be something that is really, really close to my question. So if the question
Okay.
is not really kind of going to the heart of what I really wanted, it's not going to be good, right? But let's say that the question was very good. So it means that the retrieval is going to be very good, because it's going to find the best document that answers my question. So that document will go to the large language model. The large language model is going to read it, and it's going to summarize for me, and it's going to give me an answer, right? So it's not a search. It is a search with a large language model that is giving me an answer. So it's not a Google thing or Yahoo thing or Alta Vista or whatever, right? It's this new way of doing things, right? So that's RAG. Right. So I think
Mhm.
that is what was really big, and still gonna remain a very important technology for, starting maybe last year or maybe a couple of years in the, back, and then moving forward, it's still going to be an important kind of process.
Okay. And so if we took this as just the part of the part where business decision making pretends or wishes that it was rational, right? That there were good decisions being made and that things were being made based on on a good approach. The reason I'm skeptical is, of course, that you never have the full picture of reality, right? You're always making decisions somewhat in a way based on your gut feelings about the
Hmm.
situation or the team or whatever. And most actual progress in any group effort is continually about the difficulties of communication. That's where I always want to focus, because if people communicated better, if we sat in the same room together and worked on a project for 8 hours a day, we would certainly get much farther than we would, in a sense, if we were meeting twice a week, or you see what I mean,
Hmm.
any sort of disassociated feedback loops. So I'm a feedback loop guy, right? So
Yeah,
feedback
yeah,
loops are great.
yeah.
I honestly will give computers the win, because one great thing about computer programming, you're a very good programmer, is that they pretty much break instantly and tell you, sort of tell you why, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They're pretty brittle, but they're very responsive, right? So I can
Hmm.
even remember back in the day watching someone wait, I think it was 20 or something minutes back when .NET came out, for it to compile to give them the answer that they
Hmm.
wrote it wrong. right? And I thought I love the web because it's so, it's when you break something, it's pretty much, you can see it. You see what I mean? It's very quick at giving
Mm.
you feedback. It's a much lighter language. It's not a compiled language, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, whether that means anything, I'm just a fan of feedback loops, which people
Yeah,
tend not to get.
it means a
Yeah,
lot. Yes,
yeah.
because what we just discussed was a feedback loop, right? There is a
Hmm.
question, and there's an answer coming, possibly very good answer, but
Possibly, sure.
it's just one iteration, right?
It's
It's
100%. Yes. And then you decide, and then
yeah,
my point is, then you have to measure how good your plan was based on your decision, right? So it's
yeah,
actually continuous feedback. Hey,
exactly,
did the
yeah.
team execute on this idea? And or I'm from the design world, so we used to say if you really want to do things right, you don't have one team solving a problem. You have three teams solving a problem, same problem, and then you
Mm,
pick the best parts of each problem. And we used to do that
exactly,
in the
yeah,
creative world a lot
exactly.
because it's the way it goes. You're never gonna be like arrow focused to
Yeah.
exactly the right outcome because how do you know?
Yeah, and so I was just talking with some colleagues of mine, like why Google is not the leader in AI today, right? Why OpenAI is actually outpacing Google. I mean, probably they have a lot more engineers that are great, but probably there was that feedback loop that didn't work, right? So maybe somebody wrote a memo or designed a system that was actually great, right? But then,
Mm-hmm.
in such a large organization, it kind of got stuck. No, nobody, maybe somebody read it but forgot, right? Or maybe there's just the feedback loop didn't work, or why Intel is falling behind, right? Like it was such a great organization, and it looks like they're in serious trouble because suddenly, they are not innovative enough. I mean, that's not true. I'm sure they have people that really kind of understand microcircuitry and applications, and
Mm-hmm.
probably, but now maybe, yeah, maybe the feedback loops internally didn't work. So the really real point is that having one question and having one good answer probably is not enough, right? Maybe to solve a problem
No.
you need to have hundreds and hundreds of questions, hundreds and hundreds of good answers, and retain all that somehow. And that's where maybe the new architectures come in, the strawberries, where uh, it's not just about kind of like search and kind of like question answering, but maybe it's more about problem solving, because we explicitly attack the problem that if you need to address something, you need multiple steps to do that. And maybe the AI will do
Mm.
those steps for you.
This is where I know we're in the Microsoft world, but it always feels like it'd be great if we had a whiteboard. But let's just unpack this from
Mm,
my own confused point of view. So one thing we've discussed and I've written about that I find is amusing about being bad at math, right? And the reason why I say it's bad at math isn't because it doesn't know math, it's because its process is completely different from this empirical process that we're used to.
mm,
The calculator process is infallible. Let's just put it that way, right? It knows how to do that. However, it doesn't know how to do anything else, which is fine,
mm,
right? Like we
mm,
just say, hey, based on however much we can cram into these chips, it can handle these sort of processes. And that's why maybe when it comes to like statistical analysis, the calculators aren't great. You need fancier calculators with more elaborate uh, uh, scenarios testing
mm,
to be sure, right, that you're not just feeding it one thing and getting the wrong answer,
mm,
which a regular process might not be able to pick up on. So anyway, you've got this thing of bad at math because what we were just saying is whether or not your AI is well trained, it will give you an answer, quote unquote.
mm,
The veracity of that answer, like most answers, is hey, what's the population of Chicago? I always forget, but somehow I can ask and it'll tell me. And I never mistrust it, right? I just
mm,
figured, okay, within an order of magnitude, it could be wrong, but unlikely, right? So we're in this world now. There's a lot of counting going on, and a lot of people
mm,
like counting because it is considered objective. And our hope, our point, and maybe my and your focus is that, well, now there's this new world. It isn't numeric, right? It is about taking a lot of data that's normally been discarded and using that to outweigh some of the more numeric processes, right? The more truthful looking processes, I guess I want to call it. So you ask a question, it goes and takes that question, it loops through its training database. And we both spoke of this earlier, but the funny thing was we were talking about, hey, I'm trained on all the stuff within your company. I know everything that you guys have written. Its answer from that database will be sort of seen as poorer than it just training on generic words, right? Like apparently, just like Google, the more data you have, the better your answers are going to be, even if it's completely unrelated to the topic, which is, well, we can stop there. Is that surprising? Like, is there, back to math, is math that way? I mean, I don't think the more data you take in, you can have a significant result, so to speak. But as we both know, test design is so crappy, who cares? I mean, it depends on how you gather your data, right? Like I'm gathering data right now, it's perfect, but it doesn't really tell me much if that's my goal, right? Hey, should I eat more? Should I get up earlier? It doesn't solve any problems. It just gives you some baseline, I suppose, which is similar to my trade this morning. I just sold it because I was getting antsy about it. My humanness was being weird. There was no, else involved. So stopping there, why is it that you could train on this company's perfectly reasonable, authoritative data, and you would get a worse answer than you would just, here's a bunch of words from Shakespeare that we trained it on, or whatever.
Yeah, so there's so many things here. So I think that maybe starting again with a little bit of a human equivalent, right? So up until this point, neural networks or large language models were kind of like the type of a person that likes to speak to you, right? So kind of maybe in an organization, there is always somebody that is very chatty, that is always going to come up with some sort of an answer to your question. And even though this person may not be an yeah, and maybe even this person who is not an expert in a specific domain is going to try to come up with an answer, right? Yes. So that's kind of like where we kind of roughly were up to this point. Now we gave this person like a search capability. That's where the RAG comes in. So now this person, even though they don't know specifics, they can quickly search for something and then they will get an answer. And now they can explain this, and a lot better. But up to this point, we were missing maybe another type of a person, because maybe within the organization there is a person who is really great at doing math. But this is a complete cave dweller. You cannot get like 2 words out of this person, But that if there is a mathematical problem, they will solve for you. So now, so that's basically in the AI world, that person would be an agent or a tool that maybe can be connected to, right? Like you want this guy around, right? You want this guy to solve your mathematical problem. You don't want this guy to be really kind of talkative, because you don't want to go to a dinner to dinner with that person, but huge value in that guy, right?
Well, this is where I get puzzled, because I do want to say that I kind of like the idea that there's this sort of, I don't know why the word corpus comes out, but anyway, this blob of stuff, and things go into the blob and come out of the blob, right? This is the thing. And we train the blob. The blob learns how well it does based on God knows what, that it's doing better and better. And then we have a model. We talked last week. Here's the model competition. Hey, my model's better than your model, but yet you're just comparing these blobs, as far as I know. Am I wrong? Am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, well, but the question is, what is the actual definition of the model, right? The model might be mathematical, so you need that that guy or that tool that will do it for you, right? It's the neural network doesn't need to know how to build models. It just needs to know that there is somebody or there is a tool that you can connect to and ask that resource, that tool, hey, give me
Right. I'm just
build the
saying,
model
before
for me.
we get to this meta question, I was
Yeah.
just thinking that we had these monolithic models. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
They're all-purpose models.
Mhm.
Is that where we were for the past year and a half? And these models were being updated and trained because we keep seeing things like, oh, it's 3.5, it's 4.0, whatever. Like they come up with a new iteration, but these models still are one size fits all models. Although we have one for imagery, I guess, and we have
Definitely, definitely. Yeah.
for because
Yeah.
I've asked GPT lately, and it has let me do this to create charts. Like, let's talk about a topic, and now can you graph it for me? Which is fun, actually, because it can do
Yeah.
that. So, I was like, okay, so now you got an imagery, we understand, but these are modals, right? Like you could come up with a song
Well,
or
there
something.
was really one. There was really
Yeah.
one model, which is basically associations between words. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So you have a certain string of words, and the model will predict what the next one most likely is going to be.
Yes,
And if you
exactly.
have billions and billions of those kind of associations in it, suddenly you have something that can speak to you or answer your question. So that was the single
Right.
model, right? There are some nuances there, but
Well,
fundamental there
well,
was only one.
with a fairly dense amount of prompt logic that we don't get to see, which cut out a lot of the racism and the craziness, I guess, right? Like somehow that isn't part of the
Well,
weights of the words because
yeah. You can
the
consider
words
this to
still
be
in
a
there. Yeah.
filtering device, right? It could
Yeah.
be a filtering device. Yeah.
So okay, so that's still a meta layer that you don't
Yeah.
see, but
Yes.
you do interact with, right? That
Yeah.
says, don't do nasty things, as far as I can tell. Don't recreate celebrities doing things. I guess that was a part of many of the imagery models, right? Because they
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
they wanted to avoid being shut down by the government, which is probably still, you know, looming right now. Okay, so anyway, there was always meta hidden. Let's fast forward to strawberry, which is also a funny topic, back to math, that everybody got mad that it doesn't know about how many R's are in strawberry, and everybody would say, well, that's not the way this model works, right? It's just like the math problem. It just doesn't know things because that's not how it works. It's not an empirical design that says, I can understand even what a word is. Funny thing, I always thought is it does not understand English and how English works, which is fine. There's no I understand English part of an AI. It's just more like I do this fun thing with vectors and
Yeah.
outcomes
Yeah.
that are
Mhm.
useful. And everybody
Mhm.
can say, oh, that's pretty useful. And we all move on from there, right?
Mhm.
Which is probably the next topic is what do you do with this is always what I'm curious about, right?
Mhm.
But now we have another more deliberate meta layer, and that's where I get confused. Okay, I know that your prompt has something to do with math. So I'm going to go to my math. Like, does it have parts? I mean, this is the problem. Does it even know how does even AI do, or how does a neural net do math? Is it, I don't even know.
Well, yeah. So neural networks may not be great at math, but there might be a little Python program that is going to be doing multiplications for you, or
Okay, so
doing
basically it'll just ramp up the appropriate
it will
tool.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So this is more like making it more of a tool user. Oh, that's cool. Okay, well that
yeah.
concept. So do you get to
So
tap the tools? Like,
yeah, so that's the beginning, right? So right now, Strawberry basically adds a project manager to the mix, right? So that could be done with a neural network, right? That is going to be like a little module that is specialized in kind of organizing steps towards the solution. It could be something that is trained on a vast body of AI research into planning, right? Or it could be trained on vast literature on business planning, right? Or combined, right? So this doesn't have to be like a non-neural architecture, right? So planning can be solved,
Sure.
in my opinion, with a neural network that is dedicated to that. So now you have basically kind of somebody who is managing the process explicitly for the neural network, right?
Hmm.
But maybe a more useful kind of comparison here would be, hey, I mean, I have a little Python program that is doing multiplication for me. So if I know that I have a mathematical problem, that I can detect, and that's relatively easy to do, the neural network can call a dedicated tool, ask for an answer. That tool gives you back a number, right? And there you go. So this is the big thing, right? Because now we have a modular architecture, right? Which kind of like human brain, right? You have a piece of your brain that is responsible for
Sure.
vision. You have a piece that is responsible for hearing. You have a piece that is responsible for this and this and that, right? So there's multiple regions, and I think that's where we are going, and that's a pretty big thing.
Well, that would be an enormous thing, yet my question, well, for one, it feels like we're just getting used to the model wars, right? Like how well trained are your models, or how well performant are your models? Is that wrong?
Yeah, there's definitely something to it. Yeah, how, there's standardized test sets, and everybody is kind of using the
Right.
same test sets to evaluate the quality of the outcomes. But I think that now things will be a little bit more tricky, because there is going to be this realization that, hey, maybe I don't need to know a model that performs very well on Shakespeare texts, because
Sure.
now
Exactly. Yeah.
because maybe I need a model that is problem solving for me, that in maybe an investment area, right? So it's going to perform terribly on maybe kind of some sort of English kind of tasks, but it's going to do stellar on crossword puzzles, right? So
Yes,
this
I
is
can
this
see
is
the
great.
crossword puzzle thing, which is fascinating too,
Yeah,
how hard it is to solve a crossword puzzle if you're an AI. So I
yeah,
give them credit, right?
yeah.
Of even being able to, and not that puzzle solving wasn't the main thing in the beginning, right? The whole point of all this, I thought, was puzzle solving. And that means a system that is solvable, right? Like
Yeah.
you have a solvable problem. I don't believe, as far as I know, at least in my own estimation, that financial markets are not a solvable problem, right? Like they're inherent, if they are a fair market, that they are unsolvable, right? That they cannot have any gamification to them, or else it would not be a fair market. Now, whether that exists, we'll see, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe there's so many forces, or maybe there's so few, right? Maybe there is so many. Maybe there's very few big players that have a market moving capability in whatever they do. So really, maybe there's somebody who is defining the market movement. I don't know, but
Oh
uh,
yeah, well, monopolistic, that
yeah,
always works. If you have a monopoly, that's usually your best bet. Although that's
mm,
also antitrust. So whatever,
yeah,
we've
yeah,
got these issues. Okay, cool. Well, and that's why still we have models. One of the thing behind all this is still massive amounts of energy, massive amounts of tokens. Are they still? Does this make more tokens or less tokens if you have this project manager? I guess you can queue a little bit better, maybe. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So in terms of the input window, right? So how much you can put into the model, that's probably is going to something that is going to continue increasing,
Ooh,
because it's so convenient to have a large document like a book or whatever, or a large chunk of a database, and then just send it to the neural network as a big contextual kind of blob, to your point, and kind of have the neural network munch on this, rather
hmm,
than chunk it, and then maybe knowingly assume that, hey, my chunk number one is going to be maybe be forgotten by the time I send chunk number 10 to the neural network. So I think there is this kind of token count situation is going to still be a big deal, right? And it's probably going to be increasing.
not that this is my tangential mind at work, but is there already compression here? I mean, it does seem, remember, these are just chunks of zeros and ones at the end of the day, right? Like, can't you start to see compression working, or does it already compress the hell out of everything? I don't know.
Well, yeah. So how do you process data that goes into a neural network? So obviously the data goes through the input layer. So an input layer in the neural network is this kind of like this door, right? There's only so many tokens that can go through that door at each stage, right? So there's something that goes into the neural network, gets propagated, and starts
Mm-hmm.
modifying those activations, right? And then there is another row of vectors already waiting, right? And it goes in and goes in, right? So
Okay.
so I think there's something to your point that, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a re-representation, or some people might say it's a compression process where those activations take the input data and kind of gets propagated within the neural network, right? It's kind of this ripple effect, right? So yeah, so I would say at the end, so the output, right, could be a summary, right? So it's an ultimate compression, right? The output can be, just yes or no. That could be maybe an also a form of compression as in the context of the question, right? Like, is this email correct? Yes or no, right? So yeah, so yes, I definitely can see this as a compression process. Yes.
Well, and the nice thing I would suppose is that if I have it go and create an image or something, at the end of the day, these still have to be inputs into some other process, right? Like, we're not,
Mm,
it doesn't end here. It's still about, hey, could you come up with a dozen images, put all of them out, and then just pick which one? Because I'm going to come from the programmatic advertising world, right? Like, if you can diminish the amount of hours spent in experimentation by using AI,
mm,
to me, that's just a win-win for everyone, because
yeah.
otherwise it's quite challenging to uh, employ people
Mm,
to experiment. That, and also experimentation tends to fail. Probabilistically, it should fail, because then
mm,
there's our success or failure metrics, which means it's even
mm,
better, because then you can get, hey, fail, 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 fail. Oh, hey, mold grew in this one, right? Like,
mm.
that's
Yeah.
traditional scientific method, right? That you have to test continually. Um, so I think of AI as being a partner in testing, although I think most people see it as a assistant or time saver. So my question is, probably still our goal is to help people use these tools properly. And now that there's this meta layer where there's a tool orientation, or I don't know, I've heard it called thinking about it, seems to be the quote, right? Like that
Yeah.
the AI, it'll sort of determine something. However, I'm guessing in your experience, it still doesn't say I don't know, or I don't have the capability to do this. I think that was
Well,
my fun thing with the charts, is it said I'm going to do it, but it didn't do it. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay, wait a second. So I almost feel like that's the assistant. Like, I have to keep reminding it of what's important, which is perfectly fine for me to do. Much like I would debug my program if it kept crashing, right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, you've been telling me that this part's wrong. I mistyped, or whatever. I'm sort of I'm nudging it toward a correct answer in my own mind, as
Mm,
fallible as that may be, because I still have to use that. But when it comes to letting these things loose on their own, like with programmatic advertising, just say, hey, get me clicks.
yeah. Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
going to be easier with this model? Is it the same? Is it still like I'm delusional, which probably is somewhat true.
Yeah. I think so, because it's always, even if in the programming world, right, there was always this need for modularity, object-oriented architectures, and all that stuff that really enables us to kind of like encapsulate a piece of computation so
Mm-hmm.
that it's a smaller, more manageable chunk, that you can kind of control the input to something, right? Kind of like a microservice, right? Like you control the input, you control the output. If you want to, you can modify the tool relatively easily because it's separate from everything else. So, so yeah, I would say this is a big deal because now it's no longer that necessarily kind of like unexplainable
Mhm.
neural architecture. Now there's going to be pieces of it that are explainable, and now also there's going to be this capability for us to see, hey, is that answer really correct or addressing the question? And this is something that the neural network can do relatively well, right? It can see what the output would be, and if you ask it, what's 3 times 3, and the number is 10 million, even though the AI cannot do math very well, it will know that this is a too big a number, right?
Ah,
So it will have some feeling about the answer. So I would say that that is kind of opening another kind of big deal. Like, hey, how do you evaluate the quality of the answer? But at some fundamental level, we have at least that step where the AI, you can ask the AI, part of this agentic process, AI has an explicit kind of a stage where it's going to look, is that answering the question? And if not, it's going to look for another tool. And if not, again, it's going to try to find something else. And then at the end of the day, if it couldn't find anything, it will tell you, hey, I couldn't find any tools that answered the question. But I think that, maybe I will hallucinate a little bit, but you will have a very kind of like much more informative answer.
hmm. Well, I certainly like this idea that it is mimicking, like you said, more of the way we work. Although
Mm,
our neural networks or whatever what do we call them? Our brains, I guess. You
mm,
know, they have always had a fairly robust way of routing things, right? But as you said, each part of this, we're still relying upon our own sensibilities and training to understand truth from fiction and other things. And I don't think, maybe this is another topic for another day, that one thing that people confuse things like Google in doing is to represent things that are truthful, right? It doesn't really know. It just represents things that are popular, let's just say that,
mm.
or
Yeah.
whatever, or predominant, let's put it that way.
Mm,
So that still doesn't represent facts, right? We equate the two, probably incorrectly, and that's
mm.
fine, because the decisions we make based on the fact of the population of Chicago are meaningless in most people's lives, unless you're, I had, have you ever heard of a TAM, or total addressable market?
No, not really.
It's very popular
Mm,
when it comes to asking for money for things,
mm,
because what you
mm.
try to say is, hey, there's X amount of people, 1 million people, that
Oh, okay.
are a potential market for this
Mm.
thing that I want money for me to do. So
Got it. Oh, okay.
it's this idea of a TAM. For whatever reason, every time I hear it, I put a weight on it of pretty much zero, because I'm like, how would you ever know that you could, that this market would even be aware of your potential,
Mm,
this, that, or the other. So when it comes to making money, which I
mm,
still think is fascinating, because many of our jobs, our work, are all based on economic viability, right? Our
mm,
talent. So we're both in all these worlds, right? We're in the business world, we're in the education world. All these things are based on marketability of our talent.
yeah.
And I neither of us come at AI as being a threat to that yet.
Yeah.
It at one point was just a tool to be used, right? It's just another tool. But we have many. We rely on so many powerful tools. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
We're both pretty aware of how computers help us. There's many jobs and careers that have no relevance to these tools, right? That's great. Good for them. They picked correctly. But there are so many, things that our discussions bring up. And now I just wonder, as the model gets more savvy, is that going to change anything? I mean, maybe that's the question for you. I mean, do you think, even though this is an advance, we're both in the bubble, right? We like our tools to get more powerful. I just installed all the brand new Apple crap that they just came out with yesterday, because why not, right? Like, I want whatever the new crap is. Always, however, we all find that, oh, okay, pretty much my use cases do not change. My human needs don't really change that much, and therefore the tools getting better changes things in only in a minor sense, no matter how much effort they put toward it. Sorry, Apple.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that could be definitely a topic for another meeting and another video. So yes, I'm kind of thinking hard about how to end this one on a positive note, right? But right, I mean,
Tools are getting better. Tools are getting better. I think that's always a good note, right?
Yeah, and
We like our tools to be less brittle, right?
yeah,
Those are both great things. Trustability rises. It can say, I don't know. I don't know. Can it ever say, I don't know?
yeah. Well, I think that there's, kind of maybe kind of like two general categories of tools, right? Like one is maybe like a power amplifiers, like those are your diggers, those your semi trucks, and heavy machinery, and maybe I would put office tools into that perspective, right? I mean, it's not like you and I, we have to kind of dig holes or whatever, but we know we are kind of doing manual work with those tools quite a bit, right? Making diagrams and writing emails, right? So that's one thing. And then there is a separate category of things that are really kind of really, really separate, like far out there. And those are the intelligence amplifier tools. And I think we are getting into that big time, and all bets are off. Because if after 2 years of really kind of large language model kind of like being in the spotlight, we got to that point, then things really get interesting in 2 or 3 more years, and I really don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's really kind of looking like there's going to be revolutions, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Well,
maybe it's going to be a great thing. Maybe it's not. I'm hopeful that it might be a good thing.
it's a good ending spot, and don't forget, our journey along this line was called Surviving AI for a reason, right? There's human things that need to be done, and as the tools get better, we still have to focus on what is it that we do. I think that's still been my puzzle. So we'll pick it up in the next chapter.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jack, as
Yeah.
always. Your
Yeah.
your perspective is always awesome. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. Look forward to the next meeting.
And scene.
All right.
What do you think? I don't know. I'm gonna have to bake this into a new topic.